Pritching? Picture a dog standing in front of a treat that has rolled under the couch. It cannot reach it. It does not keep trying alone. It stops. It turns. It looks directly at your face, not at the treat at you. That single glance carries something enormous, something your brain barely registers because it happens so often. It feels ordinary. But it is not ordinary. It is one of the strangest signals in the animal kingdom. And the real answer to why it happens is far stranger than the dog is smart. You have seen this moment 1,000 times and never once questioned it. A dog looks at you. A dolphin swims toward a diver instead of away. An elephant that could crush a human without effort chooses instead to lean its head gently against one. A wild whale, tangled and dying, stops thrashing the moment a person swims close, as if it understands help has arrived. Pritching. Why would a wild animal shaped by millions of years to fear anything larger, faster, or unfamiliar choose in its most desperate moment to trust the one species responsible for hunting most of the planet's large mammals to the edge of extinction? The answer is not sentimental. It is not magic. It is a story about brains, trust, and a signal older than language itself. Stay with this, because by the end, you will never look at an animal's eyes the same way again. Pritching. Start with the dog, because the dog is the doorway into everything else. In the early 2000s, a researcher named Brian Hare ran a simple experiment. He hid food under one of two cups out of sight of the animal being tested. Then he pointed at the correct cup. Chimpanzees, humanity's closest living relatives, largely ignored the point. They searched randomly, relying on smell and memory instead. Dogs did something chimpanzees could not. Pritching. They followed the point immediately, reliably, almost instinctively. A creature with a brain a fraction of a chimpanzee's size outperformed one of the smartest animals on Earth at a single task. Why? Because the task was not really about intelligence. It was about trust in communication. Dogs had spent roughly 15,000 years evolving alongside humans, and somewhere in that long partnership, a switch flipped. Wolves are cautious, independent, deeply skeptical of human gesture. Pritching. Dogs are not. Dogs are wired to look at a human face for information the way you might glance at a map. That gaze is not submission. It is a request. It says, quite literally, help me understand what you know that I do not. Hare's research went further. He compared wolf puppies raised by humans from birth to dog puppies raised the exact same way. Even with identical upbringing, the wolves still failed to read human pointing gestures as easily as the dogs did. Pritching. This told scientists something important. The difference was not upbringing. It was written into the biology itself, shaped over thousands of generations. Somewhere in the story of domestication, a wild animal did not just become tamer, it became a better communicator with an entirely different species. Ever wonder what that tells you about your own instinct to make eye contact when you're lost? Pritching. Now take that same principle and scale it up to something far larger and far less controllable than a household pet. On a December morning in 2005, a team of divers responded to reports of a distressed whale off the coast of California. What they found was a 50-ton humpback wrapped so tightly in crab trap lines that the ropes had cut into her skin, pulling her fins inward and threatening to drown her under the sheer weight of the gear. Pritching. A creature that large could kill a diver with a single involuntary movement of her tail. She did not move. As the divers worked for nearly an hour, cutting line after line, the whale remained still, as if she understood on some level what was happening. When the last rope fell away and she was finally free, witnesses described her swimming in slow circles around each diver one at a time, gently nudging them before finally swimming off. Pritching. Marine biologists who study whale behavior have long noted that entangled animals sometimes go still in the presence of humans attempting to help, even after thrashing violently only moments before near a boat. This is where most people stop and say the animal understood gratitude. That is a comforting idea, but it may not be the most accurate one. It may be something even more interesting. Think about it from the whale's perspective for a moment. Pritching. She is dying, slowly exhausted from days of fighting the ropes. Every ounce of energy has already been spent. At some point, an animal in that state may cross a threshold where continued struggle is more dangerous than stillness. Predators exploit thrashing. Predators exploit panic. Stillness, paradoxically, can become the safer option, even in the presence of an unfamiliar species. What looks like trust may also be an ancient survival calculation running underneath the surface. Pritching. And yet, that still does not explain why she circled back afterward. Why linger near the very beings capable of harming her, instead of fleeing the instant she was free? Something else may be at work. This is where the science gets genuinely strange. Multiple species that are intelligent, social, and long-lived appear to share a capacity that researchers call inference about intention. It is different from simple trust. Pritching. It means an animal can, to some degree, model what another creature is trying to do, not just what it is doing. A shark thrashing near a fishing line is a threat. A human moving slowly, deliberately, cutting rope with careful, repeated motions near the animal's body is something else entirely. Pritching. Some large-brained species appear capable of distinguishing predatory movement patterns from cooperative ones, even across species lines, even in a species they have never personally learned to trust before. Elephants offer some of the clearest evidence of this. A researcher named Karen McComb spent years studying how African elephants respond to different human voices played through hidden speakers. Pritching. She found that elephants could distinguish between the voice of a man from a group known to hunt them and a woman from a group that did not, adjusting their defensive behavior accordingly, bunching together protectively, retreating, or staying calm. This was not a reaction to smell or sight. It was a reaction to sound alone, to subtle vocal cues most humans would never think to notice. Elephants were not just reacting to humans as one undifferentiated threat. They were building something closer to a mental catalog, sorting individual humans and groups of humans into categories of danger and safety. Pritching. If an elephant can do that with voices it has never physically encountered, it becomes far less surprising that an elephant standing beside a caretaker it has known for years, one who has fed it, treated its wounds, and never once threatened it, would lean its head against that person's shoulder the way you might lean against an old friend after a hard day. That is not sentiment being projected onto an animal by a hopeful human. That is a documented pattern of individual recognition and long-term social memory playing out exactly as evolutionary theory would predict. So here's the reframe worth sitting with. Wild animals are not asking humans for help because they suddenly recognize humanity's moral goodness. They are running the same calculations they have always run. The ones that kept their ancestors alive for millions of years, except now those calculations sometimes point toward a human instead of away from one. Every wild animal alive today carries an ancient risk assessment system. Approach or flee, trust or avoid, fight or freeze. For most of evolutionary history, humans belonged firmly in the flee category, and for good reason. Humans have been apex predators for a very long time. But evolution does not deal in absolutes. It deals in probabilities, adjusted constantly by new information. And in recent decades, an animal's dataset about humans has started to include something new. Rescue. Rehabilitation. Divers who cut ropes instead of throwing spears. Rangers who tranquilize and heal instead of hunt. Sanctuaries where injured creatures are nursed back to health and released. Slowly, unevenly, in specific places and specific populations, the category is shifting. This raises a question you may not have expected. Pritching. If trust between species can shift based on accumulated experience, does that mean some animals are in a very real sense learning something about humans collectively, not just individually? The evidence increasingly says yes, at least within certain species. Crows are a striking example. Researchers have shown that crows can recognize individual human faces and pass warnings about dangerous humans to other crows who never personally witnessed the threatening event. Pritching. If a species with a walnut-sized brain can build and transmit a social reputation system about humans, it becomes far less far-fetched to imagine that dolphins, elephants, and whales, animals with brains larger and more complex in key respects than our own, are doing something similar, just on a scale, and in a language humans are only beginning to decode. Dolphins push this idea even further. Pritching. There are documented, repeated cases of wild dolphins approaching divers or swimmers, specifically when tangled in fishing line or hooked on abandoned gear, holding remarkably still while a person works to free them, then swimming close afterward in patterns marine researchers describe as unmistakably deliberate rather than random. In several of these encounters, the dolphin did not simply flee once free. It circled. It stayed near the boat. Pritching. Some researchers who study cetacean behavior describe this as possible evidence of relief-driven affiliative behavior, a phrase that essentially means the animal's nervous system is responding to safety in a way that produces attachment-like behavior, not unlike what happens in mammals broadly, humans included, after a shared moment of danger and survival. Here is the counterintuitive twist, the part that reframes everything you thought you understood at the start. Pritching. You might assume the animals capable of this kind of trust are the friendliest species, the gentlest ones, the ones evolution built to be soft and cooperative. That is not quite right. Many of the species most famous for reaching out to humans in moments of crisis, whales, elephants, dolphins, wolves, turned dogs, are also some of the most socially complex, most cognitively demanding species on the planet. They live in tight family groups, they mourn their dead, pritching. They recognize individuals across years of separation. They cooperate to hunt, to raise young, to defend territory.